So I met a Canadian. I wanted to use this encounter because I believe it has enough meat to it to form a segment. First off, what must be understood when approaching these topics is experiences of the past and perceptions of those experiences form these conclusions. Acknowledging that not everyone has these experiences should be addressed, and I acknowledge them on the outset of this story. I was brought up under my own mindset. Nobody really formed it for me. It was mainly constructed from the genuine interest of knowing the truth on whatever subject. It didn't matter. My first experience was when I believe I was 7 or 8. I picked up a Time Life hardcover book on the origins of man. I looked at it on my own with no parental influence, as I never had any beyond that age. I put it down and went on with my life. I later found out the origins presentation was not literally fact, but a premise of what might be true. I was appalled, and again, without influence. This is my own perceptions and personality forming through these experiences. The fact that a book like that would be written to convey fact disgusted me as a child. I was lied to, and that's all that mattered. I would never be the same again. That incident changed my life. When I got older, I discovered the Canadian. Now, before I go on, I must say not all people have the same experiences. These are mine and mine alone. But I found a Canadian. There was nothing wrong with this Canadian on the surface. There was nothing contemptuous. Actually, there were no issues. I didn't find out about the issues until the post-educational years, and life begins to put pressure on the young adult. That's when the truth comes out. When you have to produce in order to feed yourself. You are now paying rent as well as food, and the adulthood issues begin to rear their ugly heads. Was this directly related to this story? No. But what it does do is illustrate how people position themselves in the area of toil. I found out that toil becomes the key ingredient to our minds, and there are plenty of people who actually maneuver themselves away from toil and get others to do it for them. This was the focus in my mind as a young adult. This is what I saw. This is not to say the Canadian was lazy, but it was more about doing what they felt like rather than what life deemed as a requirement, meaning toil. I must also add, part of my perceptions does come from a job I worked where we received a special memo of how to speak to Canadian customers, which meant extra care and sensitivity. This did not sit well with me, as what about the rest of the world? Why the Canadians? Obviously it had to do with their attitudes towards the rest of the world, and they believed they needed special treatment. This again was a part of my experience which formed my perceptions. Toil is understood as work or tasks one has to do, but mostly are undesirable. You do them because they are a part of life. And for most of these tasks, they become a discipline over time and done without much effort. However, in my exposure to Canadians, I found a common denominator, and these were experiences not necessarily in long-term relationships, though one was, and I watched and learned and how time moved my conclusions for this particular person toward a certain conclusion. But some of them were brief, but reflected on interpretation due to their origins, being Canadian. The commonality was toil, but mostly in and more directly it was how to skate the system, how to avoid certain kinds of toil, how to get someone else to do their dirty work. This was the crux of my conclusion. Someone else was doing the toil and paying the price, and they had no problem receiving the byproduct of this effort. Now at this point you would say, what? People skate through life every day, including Americans, and they often use others to do their dirty work. So what is the big difference? The main difference is the focus, the absolute focus of identifying where it comes from, the root cause. Canadians have a culture of this avoidance of hard work. They are conditioned, but mostly they feel entitled towards this position. The national benefits escaping personal responsibility in exchange for servitude. Personal responsibility or personal toil is not promoted or even required when becoming a young adult. Most elements of your life will be taken care of for you, and I say if you conform to the standard. You work for an institution which is a part of this conformity. It's a temptation, and for those who won't find who they are in high school and often even in college, these temptations are hard to push away. And yes, as a rebuttal, there is the same effect in America. There is a temptation to receive certain benefits and be conditioned like a rat in a maze. I worked in it for 11 months, and I saw certain good people who were handing their lives over to a government job, a job that didn't require hard work. America has its own version of Canada. It's called state and federal government jobs. It forms certain attitudes, and most of it is entitled. After they receive these entitlements, they have no idea of leaving this ecosystem of benefits. The temptation overpowers them, and they no longer have any ability to control their lives. They must now conform. So what does this have to do with Canadians? I met one, and he didn't claim to be full Canadian, though he had dual citizenship. He was lying to me, as I let him know of my contempt. Lying is another issue with these people. They don't care about the truth. They only care about what works for them. So if they say the sky is green for a meal for the day, they will say the sky is green if told. They simply don't care. This person was also socially inept. They would not allow me to finish a thought or a sentence without interrupting and going on about something unrelated to the purpose of my time being utilized. This occurred over and over again for an hour in a room that was getting louder. The objective of the meeting was fading. He tried to listen to what I had to say and did, but was not very interested in the conclusion. He did understand my purpose, but completely characterized my intent with a word I will not say. I couldn't believe he would ask me such a question in a meeting. It was obvious the reality of the topic I was talking about was something he didn't care to involve himself in because he doesn't have to. His life was on ice and he could skate. He didn't seem to have a care in the world, and he mentioned he was on Medicare, so that told you what he cared about. At the end of the meeting, we came to the lobby. We shook hands and he stood behind me. He quickly wished for all of this to end as he moved away from me quite awkwardly. It was not how you end a meeting. Face to face, you state what's next, etc. But he didn't care because he got what he wanted, a free meal. And I didn't hear a thank you for it, if he did even express it. But he walked away to talk to someone else. His day was just beginning. That's a Canadian.